Thank you. Hey, thank you guys for being here. Actually, there's more people here than I thought were going to be coming out for 4th of July. I mean, I think some people are tired from the 4th with it. But so this is kind of our kickoff for our budget. We have a lot of work to do to put together the budget, and the budget is probably, in my mind, probably one of the most important things the city does, because this really sets the goals and everything else that we want to do and accomplish within the city. I own businesses here. I'm a homeowner. I shop here. So taxes are really a big deal for me. You know, so like I'm sure almost everybody in this room doesn't like to pay taxes, and nobody likes to have an increase of taxes. But at the same time, as mayor, since I've been here, everybody has come up to me and told me what we should be doing, what the city should be doing and spending their money on. And so with that, some of the issues that have been coming up to us is things that maybe the city should have done 10 years ago but didn't, and so we're playing catch up. So I am very conscious of what we spend our money on, what our priorities are, that we will have probably at least 2 more citizens meetings to talk about whatever your priorities are, because it's all relative. We also will be talking about, there's a survey online that you can fill out to put your thoughts of what the budget is. But ultimately, what I do as a mayor, that I work with my staff, and we'll put together a budget that is a proposal. The people that really make the decision on what we spend our money on is our city council. So there's 7 members of our council. They all have their own opinions of what we should spend our money on or shouldn't. They may agree with me, they may not agree with me. But with that, we go through the whole process, and we will change the budget several times as we get to the end, because it all has to balance out. I mean, it all comes, we only have X amount of money, and Angie will talk about revenue streams, what are the different budgets, what we can touch, what we can't do, but we have some concerns already going in the budget. I mean, right now, from a financial point of view, we're in really good shape. We have an additional pretty much $2 million from ARPA that we have, but ARPA is just one-time money, not something that we're going to be getting all the time. And we have concerns about, or not concerns, but we probably need to have more firefighters just because of medical services in Ocean Shores. Probably need staffing from the police department. We have major projects going on, which would be a police station, High Dune Trail, tsunami tower, jetty erosion, street repairs. I mean, and there's things that we have money in there, but we just have a lot of stuff that are going on. So again, what our priorities are going to be based on what you guys feed back to us, what the council will approve or not approve, and then we'll move on. And of course, this budget's important because it's a 2-year budget. So we're putting together plans. And one of the areas that I didn't talk about was Waterways, that obviously a huge priority for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Angie. She can give you a budget overview. And then we have Sarah to talk about ARPA, and then we'll just throw it open for questions.
I was told to make sure that nobody else had a microphone on, or else it would blow everybody's ears out. So anyway, so I was asked to come today. We are officially starting our 2023-2024 budget at our next city council meeting next Monday. So it was kind of very timely for me to come and talk about just kind of the process, what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months. Give you some resources in case you want to learn more about budgeting. Obviously, I can't teach you budgeting. I've been doing this for 20 years during my career, and I went to college for 4 years to learn how to do this stuff. So it's just a lot of stuff that's been learned over time and experience. But I have some really good resources to point you in the direction of online that I think are helpful if you're looking at wanting more information on how things work. So I think the first thing we'll start off is just with the budget schedule. So City Council approved our budget schedule at their last council meeting. And you'll see the first, like I said, the first council discussion on budget priorities is our next city council meeting on July 11th. So what we're going to do there, council did have a retreat, and they came up with a list of priorities that they're going to talk about at that meeting, and just kind of start the budget off. And then on July 20th, we're going to have another study session. Again, council talking more about their priorities, so they'll be having a few conversations. We are also, before we start the budget, we have to clean up the current budget that we're on. So my office right now is working on a budget amendment, which basically means I'm going in and projecting revenues and expenses to clean up the budget through the end of 2022 to give the council a good place to start for 2023. So we'll have a couple readings of a budget amendment ordinance, and it's going to be lengthy because I go through all the revenues, all the expenses. So you'll probably see that a couple times at council as well. Also internally, working on our revenue forecasting for 2023 and 2024. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into some other handouts here. First citizen input meeting is July 25th, so important for you to note. That's going to be the first time the citizens have the opportunity to come speak on the budget, and we definitely want your input. It helps guide us, direct us to figure out what the citizens' priorities are, so it's very important. Then kind of internally, we're working on budget. The staff, the department heads have 3 weeks to get their budgets to me, and then I have a little over a month to get a budget to the mayor. During that time period, we have staff coming to council meetings to talk about their budget requests. We have the committees and boards coming to council meetings to talk about their budget requests. So again, it's a lot of opportunities for the citizens to come and listen at, kind of what we're talking about, what we're thinking, so that you have that knowledge going into it. Like, okay, they think my priorities are the same as theirs, or they don't. So it's just kind of important to keep involved. We give a preliminary budget to the mayor. Like he said, we go through a couple iterations of the budget. Usually this preliminary budget is very broken because it's all the staff wants. And what we know is that we can't fund everything the staff wants. So that's when we get back together with all the department heads and we start going through it and say, you only have this much money, we have to cut some of this stuff out to get it to a clean version that we deliver to council. So when we turn over a budget to council, we have to make sure all of the fund balances are in the positive. Council does have a financial policy that we try to adhere to as far as fund balance, levels, reserves, things like that. So we work really hard to try to meet those goals and give a nice budget over to council, and then they start their work. So in this, there's another study session, public hearings. You'll see all these things going on through October. Also do our property taxes, our public hearings, and then we finally bring the budget ordinance to council. Usually takes at least twice, sometimes 3 times to get that passed, which is fine. It's a huge budget. We have to work through it. And then hopefully by December 12th, we'll have it approved and get it published in January. With a biennial budget, we're required in the second year of the budget to go through and do a big budget modification, which is the second spot on this schedule. And we're required by law to go through and do these things to basically, again, clean up the budget halfway through to make sure we're all in line, and that is a huge budget amendment that will come at the end of 2023. So that's the process. I was asked to kind of talk about funds and how this works, and our accounting is prescribed by the state auditor's office. So they have what's called a BARS manual that tells us how to report our funds. And you'll hear a lot of talk as we get into the budget about the general fund and the utility funds. So I just kind of wanted to throw this in there as a high level kind of summary. The general fund, the auditors require us to roll up a few different things into that fund as a whole. So it includes our general fund, our 001 fund, which is basically general services of the city. It's your fire, your police, your parks, your litter control, things like that. Our council contingency fund is also in there, so that's the fund where council sticks money away each year to use in case of emergencies. I don't think I've used it since I've been here, so which is good news. There's a limit set on that in state law. We can only accrue so much in there. We're not close yet, but we keep an eye on that just to make sure we don't go over that limit. And then the Arca Fund is our rescue plan funds, which Sarah will hit on. That's our $2 million that we're going to be having a ton of discussions on during the budget, which is why we asked Sarah to come here today. Special revenue funds, those are funds that they're not required to be reported in other things like debt service or capital, but we like to maintain them internally to keep track of certain functions. So we have streets, just some examples. EMS is a big one in there. So that's our ambulance, hotel motel tax, the convention center, and you can see the other ones in there. I was asked to kind of talk about the level of budget for fire and EMS because that's going to be a very hot topic this year. So I just ran some quick numbers today. Between the fire budget, the EMS budget, and the debt payments on the fire station, it's about 14% of our entire city budget. So it's a big number, and that's why we're going to be having a lot of discussion on that. The interesting thing about emergency care or the EMS is it's funded in primarily 3 different ways. We have the levy that the voters approved in 2022, the 50-cent levy. We have the actual ambulance fees, which is what they charge for going out on runs and collect through insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. And then we also have the ambulance utility, which is the rate that you see on your utility bills. So that's probably going to be what you're hearing quite a bit about. We are actually doing a rate study right now. We're working on getting that finalized. They've also incorporated some staffing recommendations and scenarios to attach to the rates. So we're going to be presenting that pretty soon. As soon as we get it wrapped up internally, it's getting real close. But that was pretty key to have going into the budget so we kind of know what we need as far as staffing and utility rates. Debt service, that's pretty explanatory. We've been paying off so much debt. It's been amazing, I must say. We still have a few big ones, the fire station. The GO street bond redemption is done. Convention center bonds, of course, those are big. The LID. So we're getting down there. It's kind of nice to have limited debt. When I first got here, it was a little overwhelming. Capital projects. So our big one is the Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 301. That's where we fund things, the dune trails in there, the tsunami towers in there. We put some reserves aside for a future ladder truck, I think, for the fire department. So there's a lot of different pots of money in that fund that's specifically designated for either current projects that we're working on or we're saving money for future projects. Enterprise funds. Talked a lot about these. Enterprise funds are, I call them our utility funds. Basically, these are the funds that their revenue comes from rates. So it's water, sewer, storm. So these are the funds that are supposed to be self-sustaining. So whatever needs we have in these funds, the rates should be sufficient to meet those needs. So that's what we talk a lot about. We don't just move general fund money to the utilities. It's not the intent. The utilities should be self-sustaining, and that's why we have to do the rate increases, which I know nobody likes. The last couple ones are just some internal funds. We self-insure our unemployment, so that's in there. Self-insurance is our severance fund. We have employees retired, and we have a reserve fund set aside that we put money into to make sure we have money to pay off those buyouts when people retire. And then the custodial funds, that's our newest one. That's a transportation benefit district. That's an entire separate entity, actually. We have that separate on our financial statements. We do a separate annual report. So it's very transparent what's going in and out of that fund. Okay. Revenues. So now that we kind of know what the fund types are, here's kind of this is 2021. So general fund was 30%. Again, that includes ARPA, which is a big number. The special revenue funds, which includes the ambulance, was at 20%. Debt service is getting lower, down there at 7, I believe is what that is. Capital projects at 12. The enterprise funds, the utilities, it's a big number, it's 29%. So again, that's your water, sewer, storm. Those are attached to rates. And then the internal service and the custodial funds are little, just 1% each. And you'll see the expenses kind of track the same, pretty consistent. General fund is still the biggest, followed closely by the enterprise funds and then the special revenue funds. So this is, like I was saying, I can't teach people budgeting, but what I did do is I went on, these are classes that I myself take and guides that I use when I'm doing budgeting every year. So the first one is on AWC, they have a budgeting basics and it's a video series. And this one is actually, it's got little snippets of video. What's a budget? What are the types? So you'll probably hear him talking a lot about what I just talked about. But Mike Bailey is one of the premier trainers of the finance directors across Washington State. He retired, I believe, a couple years ago, so he's no longer at our budget trainings, but I would recommend anything that he does or says or puts out with phenomenal resources. He's just a very smart guy. He got so many budget awards. He worked at the city of Redmond and a bunch of other places before that. But so these are really short little tutorials if you're interested in seeing, just kind of diving in onto some more budget stuff. MRSC, we use this quite a bit as well. Just has, again, a bunch of information on the process. So this includes like calendars and things like that. More fun type stuff, fund balance, how to balance your budget, things of that nature. So that one's really helpful as well. This revenue guide, even though it's almost 200 pages long, is probably one of the most amazing things I've read. It has every type of revenue that cities and town gets. It has RCWs in there. It talks about what they are, what you can use them for, how they're calculated. So anytime you get a question about, well, how is this sales tax calculated? This is where I go. Amazing resource. It's quite lengthy, but it's very, very, very informative. And I'm going to wrap up with a shout out to hopefully get people to fill out our budget survey. So there's a code in the handouts. It's online. It's really short. So there's not that many questions. But we're really hoping to get as much feedback as we can. Last time I checked, I think we had 100 responses. That was a few days ago. Now we're about 200. So we want to get that up. The more information we can get on what the citizens want in this budget, the easier it is for us and council to get a budget built and try to resolve those concerns and get your priorities in there. So I think that is it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and I'm going to turn off the mic.
Hello, Sarah Bisson, Grant Coordinator and Economic Development Officer for the city. I am here today to talk about some ARPA funds. Our ARPA, that's the American Rescue Plan Act for COVID response. It has, we are considered a non-entitlement unit, which means that we have a population of 250,000 or less. So the regulations surrounding ARPA are slightly less than that of Seattle or another larger metropolis. We received 2 tranches, one in 21, one in 22. We just got notification of the 2022 allocation coming in for $906,393. That is a total of $1,812,786. That will be budgeted out during the budget process this year. There are certain silos of expenses that can be allocated for that purpose, and part of that is revenue replacement should the city council choose to go that route. Another is fighting the impacts and effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can provide funding or services for those businesses, nonprofits, and citizens impacted by COVID-19, broadband infrastructure, stormwater and wastewater infrastructure, and premium pay for those employees that are hired specifically for COVID-19. We do not have any of those here in the city as of yet. The only expenses that have been allocated by the city council thus far was $50,000 to low-income impacted citizens through our utility billing. So the CAP office administered those funds, and I believe there are still funds available for those that would like to utilize it or can show the need to utilize that funding. We have over 2.5 years to still allocate this funding, so we need to obligate our fundings by December 31st, 2024. We can liquidate the fundings by December 31st, 2026, so an additional 2 years. But we need to have a spending plan in place, and by federal definition, obligation is through purchase order or contract, so we've got to have it dedicated to an expense. And then we have an additional 2 years to actually expend the funds and accomplish the program. So less the $50,000, we have about $1,752,786 to still allocate in the budget process out of those silos. And we have put those links, if you'd like to look into the final rule a little bit more and contribute your comments in regard to allocating that funding out. Those links are available in prior city documents, and we can make sure that they're accessible. My other role within the budgeting process is going to be sitting in the budget meetings, because on those items that are removed from the budget that we cannot fund because the city does not have the funds to do so, those will be unmet needs that I will continue to research for grant funding and other funding avenues of funding potentially for those needs. So yeah, that's it. I would just encourage you to speak to your council and participate in those community meetings in order to provide your opinion on how you would like to see those ARPA funds expended. And just an example, when I say social distancing, those impacted, response to COVID-19, that could be anywhere from social distancing measures as an outdoor pavilion for people to gather outdoors. It could be ADA access for kayaks. It could be anything to get the public outdoors and, outside of harm's way of COVID-19. So it's a pretty broad range in definition. So I would bring your ideas and encourage you to do so.
So, Sarah, I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Sure.
Because one of the things you didn't mention is that you're also our airport coordinator or administrator or whatever it is. But there's always the question that comes up on the airport because there's some big expenses the airport has, and we have a contractual obligation with the federal to do that. Could you just walk through the process of how Ocean Shores is involved with the airport?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to touch base a little bit at the council meeting this next Monday in regard to this, but I'm going to wing it here today because I don't have all of my information in front of me. The way that the airport is funded is through FAA entitlement funds. We are considered a basic unit. We receive $150,000 a year, and as far as I know, that's been going on for decades. Once you accept FAA money, we are responsible to follow their regulations and be in compliance for 20 years thereafter. So when they come along and say you have trees obstructing the airspace, we either A, don't accept their money because we no longer want to be a part of FAA and follow their regulations and then absorb the entire cost of the project, or we accept their 90% and we pay 10%. So at the beginning of 2018, it was realized that there was some obstructions encroaching the airspace, and by obstructions I mean trees and shrubs, not necessarily on city land, but still within the airspace. And it's kind of an unusual situation because the way that airspace works with FAA is it comes off the runway like so, and then it comes off the side of the runway like so. So it kind of changes, and those trees start to begin to encroach. We've conducted an environmental assessment. We paid, matching share on that. We've conducted a design, and this is quite a bit of cost. We're talking about very close to $1 million project over the course of 5 years. So now we're in the position of moving forward. This will be another capital project moving into 2023 of actually going in and removing those trees. And we are doing so on WDFW land, but because of an navigation easement created when the airport was moved in 1983, we are responsible for maintaining that vegetation. We are typically responsible for 10% of the cost. So FAA pays 90, we pay 10. WASDOT Transportation Aviation Division will sometimes contribute 5% towards that, and they've done so on previous grants. This is a large portion of a project coming up, which is the actual removal of the trees. And because we're working with WDFW land, it's imperative that we consider habitat and the environment. So not only do we have to go in and completely chop down the trees, leave them lying where they are so as not to disturb habitat, we also have to replant so many trees in order to replace the large trees that we're taking down. And so there's cost associated with the removal, there's also costs associated with impacting wetlands, and there's also costs associated with the actual replanting, and we had to hire an arborist to come in and identify the trees that need to go back and be replanted. It's a lot of information, but basically once we're in with the FAA, it's almost like if you accept their money, you continue to in perpetuity, because you accept it, they tell you you have to follow their regulations, and then there's this huge ticket project, and either you foot the bill yourself or you continue to move forward and kind of march down the line at FAA's orders. So I don't have all of the figures net yet, but they will be issued on Monday's council meeting. I don't have them here in front of me, unfortunately. But did I answer the question that you asked me?
You did,
Okay.
and of course the more details we'll have at the council meeting on
Yes.
Monday. But it is somewhat confusing because obviously the agreement was entered in way before any of us were here.
Mm-hmm.
We're locked into it. They pay the majority of it, but there is like the 5% that we're responsible for. And I'm
10%.
just, or 10%.
Yes, sir.
But sometimes we get an additional 5%.
Sometimes we do.
But again, once you enter in with federal grants, there's things you have to follow, and you don't have an option to go, we just don't want to do that. And I'm just been amazed as Sarah's been working through this stuff about having the arborist, what are the trees that we need to replant and the impact. Just like when we're doing the Oyhut Creek, we're spending a lot of time and working on to see whether or not there's an endangered species in that creek, and even if there isn't, then we're still responsible because they one day could possibly live there. So it's a frustration when we're dealing with grant money, but I just thought it would be important for you to talk about it.
I do have one more thing to touch on. The FAA will only pay to remove a tree one time in the course of, I don't know, FAA's life, the tree's life, because we're taking it down. When we're moving forward, we are thinking about what happens in 50 years from now. How do we plan to move forward and not have to spend this? Even FAA at the federal level is putting in 90% of the cost. Ultimately, that ends up being taxpayer dollars, regardless of how you look at it. So We are entering into an MOU, or we're creating an MOU with WDFW now that will allow us to go in and manage that vegetation with city employees, and then we wouldn't have to jump through all of the hoops utilizing federal dollars. So eventually that would be a lower cost to the city over time versus this large cost now. So the MOU would allow our city staff to go in and groom the trees as necessary, and the environmental hoops that you have to jump through, like the environmental assessment, which is a $330,000 cost, would not necessarily need to happen. There's a lot of red tape that you have to jump through in order to utilize federal funding. So we are looking towards the future to remedy this, so that way we don't have to face the same obstacle.
Okay, then Sarah, you're going to handle the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why we just need a microphone, if you have questions, because we're doing video, so the people that watch it later, they can hear them there. So we're going to open up the questions. Anyone got any questions? No?
Yeah, I want to ask about the new police station, and just to bring people up to date, council's going to approve to sell, put on the ballot for November election to sell $12 million of general obligation bonds. And I know there's a question, you mentioned on the radio that the site location was no longer the parking lot next to the skateboard park, it was over on Ocean Shores Boulevard, but you've never announced that at anything but on KOSW. So my question is the council going to pass a resolution definitely stating that's the location for the police station, so that when it comes time to vote, there's something on the books besides maybe it'll go here or maybe it'll go there? So I'm asking, is there going to be a resolution? And second of all, has anybody inspected those lots that you are very pushing to be satisfactory location, environmentally, wetlands and things? So my questions really are resolution, stating positively that's the location people will be voting on, and what's been done to examine the property.
We haven't done any examination of the property. Council has approved for us to move forward and put it on the ballot. I've had individual conversations with the council. Council has said that that is a place that they would support for us to move forward, because we looked at, well, we gave the council originally 3 options. They didn't like any of those options. We did have conversations of where there's some, whether or not there was property that we could purchase. The places that we looked at to purchase were not available; they were not for sale, and so our alternative is the Ocean Shores Boulevard. So the council has given me approval to move forward. That is what, I don't know if that's going to be listed on the ballot of actually where the location is. I think it's just all that although we're putting forward, is there enough money that we want to have it voted to move forward on?
My question really is there going to be a resolution so the voters know, yes, the city's plan is to put it there?
Well, there's not going to be a resolution. I plan at the next council meeting to say that's where it's going to be.
One more question. Are you planning to sell any existing property to help finance that, lower the cost of those bonds? Maybe sell some property and only sell $9 million worth of bonds?
So the question is, are we going to sell any other property? Right now, and that's a decision the council would have, and the council's not giving me any authority to do that. Right there, Jan is right there, and then Susan.
Thank you. I noticed on the agenda for Monday, you've got a resolution to adopt the Transportation Improvement Program for 2023 to 2028, a 6-year, and it's a total of approximately $75,807,469 for a 6-year. I noticed that the last item on there is to reestablish the passenger ferry service between Westport and Ocean Shores at a cost of $2,348,200, and it says the start years are all, so indicating that tomorrow we could start, if it was approved by council, that we can start working on it. There are many of us that have a concern about the actual total cost and the benefit of putting in a ferry system versus working on other items in Ocean Shores that are good for the citizens and good for the tourists. Thank you.
So the transportation plan has already been passed. We passed that at the last council meeting. The items that are on there, they have to be on there if there's potential for us to look for funding. So if there's outside funding, if they're not on there, most likely they're not going to fund because it's not part of our plan. The ferry is something that maybe someday in the future, but I have had conversations that right now, I agree with you, there's other priorities for us to focus on, and there's nothing that I'm personally working on as far as the ferry right now, but if an opportunity came up, I would definitely look at it. So there's a lot of things that are on that plan that probably will never happen. I don't know, like if the parking garage at the convention center are still on there, but so that's just something we have to put together because we have to turn that in that when we're looking for funding. So there's nothing we're working on the ferry right now. There's no way that the city has enough money to pay for all the stuff that's on that list, and we'll work. The council will approve anything before we move forward on it.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you, Mayor. Susan Canary. On the municipal bond, we talked a while back about the fact that the city is required, I believe under the RCW, to have committees, that they have council members that would be for the bond and council members that are against it, and those committees will be formed. Has that happened yet? And are citizens allowed to be part of those committees?
You're talking about putting it in the voters pamphlet, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Apparently there have to be committees and council members have to be part of that. They have to do both for and against. I don't know if it's just on the ballot or if it's a committee that meets.
My understanding it would be a committee, a campaign committee that would be put together. If someone sponsors for that, they have the opportunity to speak, and then if there was a group that was against it, I don't know if there's a requirement to have council members on it.
No, it's in the ordinance. There's no requirement that way.
Okay, so as far as I know, there's not a requirement, but that if someone wanted to speak for or against it in the voters pamphlet, that you have that opportunity.
Thank you. Then I misunderstood. I thought it was something that the city itself started, but it would be up to the citizens themselves if they wanted to form a committee, if they were going to say they wanted it or they didn't.
Right, because the city itself can only present whatever the facts are of what we're doing. They cannot actually come out for or against it, but just here's where it's going to be, how much it's going to cost, what we're going to do, and it'll be up to if there's a committee formed for it or against it.
And to find out the date that we're required to do that, we would get in touch with the auditor, I assume.
Yeah, that would be something that we probably could reach out, Sarah, and just ask of what that time is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Caroline Emmert. It's our understanding that one area where services in this area could be improved is in the emergency transportation of folks out of the area. We understand that the current firefighters contract requires them to provide that transport, and that 2 firefighters must go on that transport vehicle and can be gone for 2 to 4 to 6 hours, and reducing the number of personnel for first responding. I believe your proposal is to add $1.7 million to the budget to bring in 1 unit, which is 9 personnel, to the fire department to solve that, which would put more firefighters on. But I don't see that that is necessarily the best use of those funds. And wouldn't those funds be better put to use towards a partnership with an emergency service such as an ambulance service that could take custody of those patients and take them out of the area, leaving our first responders here in the area. And I think that would probably require a contract change, a renegotiation of the contract. Would that be something that you would be open to exploring at the next contract and negotiation?
So that has been brought up to me several times, and I am open to any possibility of whatever will improve services for Ocean Shores. Right now, is it $700,000 that we're behind as far as just money coming in to support our existing firefighters. So to get to the number that you talked about, I think is an additional $1 million. So like we're 1.7 million that we need to pick up. I've not talked to Right to Wellness, but as an example. But one of the things that I had a conversation with, that the problem that we have is that they cannot transport a life-threatening situation. They're not qualified. They're not approved by the county. So the county is the one that would actually have to approve them. Number one, to get there. As far as a partnership, I do believe that there would be an issue that I would have to deal as far as a contract negotiation, and I'm already pretty sure that it's going to be a contentious contract negotiation that we have going in, because their position is they want more people, and the majority of our calls are actually emergency or our medical services versus a fire call, which costs us a lot more, and then we're having difficulty to recruit. So I'm not saying that I'm against it. I would definitely look for it, but in conversations with other cities that approach that way, the problem that Right to Wellness has had is staffing issues themselves, because you would need to, if we were going to go into a partnership, we would need to have their unit to be available. And the last time that when we initially had that first conversation, their vision was we would call them, they would come out. They wouldn't have a unit positioned out here, which I don't know if it's real practical. But I'm always open for any ideas with it, and I'd be more than willing to sit down to whoever would propose whatever the services are going to be there. I do believe that a possible solution that it would be indirectly beneficial for us, which is Summit has already started, is a partnership where they do they've got a private company that transports like into Olympia. So for instance, if we could go into the hospital, drop them off, and we wouldn't have to wait for them, because sometimes we have to wait to make the decision whether or not they've got to go on. That to me would be more beneficial to us than out here. But again, I'm always open to whatever ideas that would help us financially or help us from a service point of view. There is, I think Mike had a question in the back.
Yeah, my question's for Sarah. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while about grants, trying to get some information about them. And I think you're the person that has all that information. I work with a group that, and the mayor knows this, has been working actively trying to get better medical help here in the city. And for a while we were looking at grants to see whether it's the USDA or the state of Washington that could help us with our situation, because we are a rural area, and I know there's grants out there to help rural areas when they need medical help. I'm wondering, I don't know off the top of your head, I don't know if you know anything or not, but is it possible to get some sort of a grant, be it the federal government or at the state level, that could tie us in with UW to help bring more medical personnel to our area? Like CMAR is very shorthanded. They've been shorthanded forever. And as a result, they have pretty bad service. But they keep telling us if we can get people here to work, that would help that. Is there a type of grant that could help us get people in here?
Well, my position in seeking funding is driven by council request, mayoral direction, and our comprehensive plan. So although it may be a priority in the overall scheme of things or planning in the future, it is not on my plate right now to seek medical personnel. The question is, how would we administer that grant here within the city and then and get it out? So we have to form a policy or an agreement with CMAR, and that could potentially, we can't write a grant in for favoritism, if that makes sense. We don't want to say, we're going to give this medical personnel to CMAR. We may have another clinic that's interested in coming to the area, or what sets precedence, CMAR versus another business. So there's a lot of things that we'd have to hammer out there. As far as the city supporting a nonprofit with grant writing assistance, that's something you would have to request from the mayor, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
Well, do you think, is there money
There is-
available to bring something like that here, to get help to bring people in here?
My prior experience, so I've been in grant writing for about 14 years, and my prior experience was working with the Indian Health Service for the Quinault Indian Nation. But when you are seeking grants, there is medical specific grants for studies and things like that. But if we were talking about specific medical personnel to provide primary care or emergent care, that's a separate duck. So I'm not sure necessarily that there is funding out there. I could say potentially, because there is so much funding out there for medical purposes, but specifically what I've seen is to medical or scientific research more than supporting personnel.
Where would you recommend us to go to look for that?
Well, it depends. There are several places to look for government. So grants.gov is a federal webpage where all of your assistant listings through federal funding is provided. And so that's where I would start. But if you were to want to enter into a partnership specifically with UW, you might have to look under UW. It's something we could potentially look into, but again, at what point do we service one entity versus all entities and to treat everyone equitably?
And I was at the same meeting that you were, that had the conversation with CMAR as well as our hospital district. In my mind, they're the ones that have to lead as far as finding grants. We as a city will help support it, but we're not in the medical delivery service. We are in the emergency services, and more, I'm all about helping out, but when it comes to us as a city, we are not prepared to fund a hospital. We're not, I mean, we just don't have the funding or the resources to do that. They do. I will be there legislatively helping them, trying to get whatever it needs to be, but again, it's going to be back to them, or say the University of Washington is going to want to come to Ocean Shores. I mean, but we just don't have the resources with our funding to take on more than what we have when it comes to just emergency services on it. But I'm more than willing, if they want a letter of support, if there's something that I need to go talk to someone about, I'm there. But again, I don't think that we're in a position, because typically if you don't have a hospital, that you can't apply for a grant for something that you don't have with it. So, but we're continuing to work with it, and I thought it was a pretty good conversation that we had with both of those groups. So I'm somewhat optimistic with it. There was someone right over here who had a question.
Thank you. My name is Rick Beveridge. First, I just want to say that I really appreciate the city having these kind of meetings. I've said this before, but I'll say it one more time. It was really frustrating previously when you had no voice to the city. It was felt by most of the taxpayers in this town, and I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here and talk to you people and get questions answered. Now, just to be a little nitpicky, because it's kind of who I am. Your survey, which popped up on my phone the other day, and I filled it out and sent it in to you. But when I first got it, well, this is cool. They're asking for my input about how to spend my tax dollars. And every question I read, I'm going, wait a minute. this doesn't have anything to do with spending my tax dollars. This doesn't have, you know, I'd say 75% of those questions honestly had nothing to do with how to spend my tax dollars. How do you like living in Ocean Shores? You know, it's a great place to live, but that doesn't have anything to do with my tax dollars per se. I would like to see something else like that sent out that's much more specific about budget items that need to be talked about, maybe the South Station for the fire department, you know, to do whatever it is, crosswalks, whatever it is. Let's get rid of what I would call fluffy questions, feel-good questions, and let's get down to get some specific feedback from the taxpayers, because ultimately taxpayer money matters, and how it's spent matters to us. And the one other question I have, just really quickly, is as we're going forward, it's pretty obvious to most people that we very possibly are headed into a recession in this country. What has the city done to plan for revenue shortfalls as a result of that? I know in the past, I was told that during the last big recession, the city ended up having to lay people off. And I don't want people that work for a city to get laid off. I would rather the city go, okay, this is on the horizon. This could well happen. So should we maybe scale back a little bit of what we're spending to have a little bit of cushion? And if it happens, we're better positioned to deal with it. Is that a conversation you people have had?
Angie and I have that conversation almost on a daily basis, because I think that she inherited what the situation of the city was when we took over, and we had high debt levels. Steve Ensley, former finance director, was really all about helping us with the finances. We have been very aggressive of paying down debt. If you look at where we were from a debt level to where we are now, huge improvement. And we really have, if the time that I've been on the council, we've not really taken on any major debt. We've really been focused on paying things down. I've been very, and of course I've only been, I'm at 6 months now, 7 months as mayor, but we've been very intentional as far as looking at staffing levels. I mean, and that's why I'm really concerned about when it comes to increasing the levels of firefighters, because it's a huge cost, I'm sure we're going to have a discussion, but there's some people think that, you know, instead of if we're going to do additional firefighters, that we should take it out of the general fund versus taking it out of EMS, which I'm totally against that. On council, I fought for having the EMS to be separate, be a standalone, so we can determine whether or not it's the right amount to spend or not. So we've been you're going to see that the budget revenue that we're looking at, that I and Angie were going to present, that we're going to be pretty lean on what our revenue growth is, because I don't want us to spend too much money. I've been in conversations with our major projects where we have funding, and a couple of those projects that we've actually had the conversation that we're going to walk away from the project if we can't get additional funding to cover off the shortfalls. And so far that we've been getting the money. So I think about it all the time. You know, as being a business owner, I see daily of what's happening as far as sales go. And again, talking with Angie, if I'm looking at the future, I think if we do have a recession, I think Ocean Shores, and people may disagree with me, but Ocean Shores will be okay. And the reason why it will be is that we have a lot of new people that have moved in. A lot of people have paid cash for their house, so there's not like a lot of, we don't have a lot of finance houses that are coming in. So number one, we've got the property taxes that will be very consistent for us. That if you look at Ocean Shores and how it's grown, that we're not as dependent on tourist revenue that we've been before, because it's kind of separated. They've changed the tax law. So in the past, we didn't get taxes when people bought from Amazon. Now that we do. So if you look at our sales tax revenue, we may be getting more on the outside. So I'm very cautious. I talk to Angie all the time. I think I'm probably more nervous than Angie is, and Angie's a very nervous person. But as I talked to Scott, who's on vacation, but if he was here, one of the things that I have the biggest concern as being mayor is being the mayor that drove Ocean Shore's financial ruin. So that's my motto in the back of my head, is I do not want us to get over our skis. I mean, if I didn't think that we could afford, like, the police station, I would never bring it forward. And I know it's a big number, but looking at the numbers work out. So I'm not going to go crazy on hiring people. I'm not going to go crazy on spending, your money. It's my money. I get as irritated. You can talk to my wife when I'm doing my taxes, filling out my quarterlies, doing my monthlies. It just irritates me when I have to write those checks. And same thing with you. So I believe that it's your money and it's my money, and we want it there. But at the same time, I say that, which irritates me. I say that because there's things that I am going to be asking the citizens that we need to spend money on, such as the waterways, such as EMS services, the police station. But I will try to do my best. But back to your question, yes, we talk about it all the time. We have more money in the general fund than we've ever had before. We have the council discretionary fund, which is higher than we've ever had. We've got funding for our roads, which we're behind on spending our money on it. But we've been, since I've been mayor, really have not been spending a lot of money. We've been very cautious of what we're doing. Yes?
Just a last comment. I hope you're prepared for a bit of a battle on the police station. I have taken, whenever I get an opportunity, I stop and talk to people. Pickleball. I walk out in the middle of pickleball. Can I interfere in your game for a minute? And I've talked to, in the last month, I've talked to a little over 36 people. I've had one person out of 36 say, I might vote for that. And everybody else goes, not only no, but hell no, I would never vote for that much money for the police. So it's going to be a battle.
No, and I totally understand, and that's why it's going to the citizens to vote. I mean, and like this budget, if the council doesn't want it, then we're just not going to do it. That the council and the citizens are going to make the decision. If you don't want the police station, you're not going to get the police station. You're going to be dealing with the police station, and we're going to be kicking it down the road another 10 years. So, I mean, it's like anything. It's like people say, I want a quicker response time from our fire department. If we don't open up the South End Fire Station, and you're not going to fund it, you're not going to get it. If you don't want additional people to be hired for public works, we're not going to mow the lawn. I mean, so eventually, I mean, it's going to be up to the council and ultimately you as citizens to vote of whatever you want the future of Ocean Shores to be.
One last thing. It wasn't so much that people are totally against it. I'd say the prevailing comment was, I think we need a better police facility, but close to $20 million after we pay the bond costs and everything is not reasonable. It's not even close to reasonable.
Where do you get $20 million?
Well, what the bond is, it's 12 million for the building, and what's the interest over the term of the bond? That's another 6 or 7 million, isn't it? That's the number I'm hearing. It's like 19 million.
Well, and I would say that we haven't, as a city, we have not done a good job of, because right now we're in the early parts of it, but we will do much more of explaining of what you're paying for and what you're getting for.
Because that's the perception out there right now.
No, and it's fair. And that's why that I think it's important that citizens vote. And you may vote yes, you may vote no. And I respect whatever the citizens say. But as mayor, I think it's important for me to bring forward what I think is the best thinking, and then people can tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm fine with that. And then back to your original conversation, if you could send me your thoughts on the survey, what you would like to see,
sure,
and then we can do an update on it. But the survey, we did it. This is the second one we've done. We're always working on trying to do a better job of getting feedback from everybody.
Right.
I think that if you tell me what you guys want, what you guys need to make us better here in the city, I'm all for it.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, send me an email.
I'll do that.
It's worth saying too that we pull this data at a very surface level, and then the council does their list, and then the staff does their list, and then that's all sent out to the citizens to put their view on.
So we have Lillian, and then we have Mike.
First, you're doing a great job. And Angie, I think maybe some of the people in the room are missing your background. Angie was an auditor here, or was in charge of audits here, at a time when financially we had serious problems, both spending and with revenue. And coming out of the last recession, going into the last recession, we were at an all-time low, and our debt was at an all-time high. And in the last 2 years, that's totally reversed itself. And the bonds that are being retired now are more bonds will be retired than will be incurred if we take the bond for the police station. I believe that's a true statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is true. It's less than half of what the sewer bonds were.
Less than half. So we're not talking about a huge new expense. We're talking about doing some smart building and doing what needs to be done to keep our city current with its growth.
Yeah, and I would say that was kind of the strategy was we knew we had this big bond falling off, and it's time to do another project. Back when there was so much debt, it was because everything had to be fixed at once, and that's what we don't want to get ourselves into again. It's if we got the sewer bonds paid off, okay, let's focus on the police station. You know, we're going to do a 20-year bond on that. We don't want to do 30 because probably in 20 years we're going to need something else. So it's strategic in trying to plan ahead and just be on top of things instead of having everything fall apart at the same time, which is what got us in trouble last time.
Okay, and our TV reporter is running out of tape, so or whatever they do. So we've got, I think, about 10 minutes left. So Mike and then Susan.
I'll do this real quick. So it's apparent that getting better medical help here is my thing. And one thing I want to say about UW is that they do have a rural medical program as part of their medical degree, where they send people out to these areas to fill in the need they need for better medical care. Now, Frank here has tried months and months to get some help from UW. He's written letters, he's called them, he's been trying to be very active with that school to have them come out and talk to us and see if they can't do something for us. They won't even return his frickin' calls. So I don't know what's going on at UW, but maybe they'll answer to our mayor. Is that something you could do, is call UW, say I'm the mayor of Ocean Shores and we want to talk to you? Because we need some help with that. Now, I bring that up because Hashim at CMAR asked us to be his headhunter. He wants us to find people living here to work there. We're no headhunters, but we could talk to people, we know people. But if we can get some support from UW, I think that might be our answer.
Okay.
Can you do that?
Well, I can reach out, but I would tell you that there's another thing that I'm working with the University of Washington, and they are difficult of returning phone calls. So I don't think it's just Frank. I think that they view at a much higher level, and I think when you talk Ocean Shores, because one of the things I've always felt that Ocean Shores struggles because we don't have a seat at the table at times, and so but I applaud Frank and you to continue to keep the fires burning, and you keep on talking, and maybe we'll get something with it. But no, I don't have any problem. I can reach out. In fact, I am talking to Derek Kilmer tomorrow, so I definitely will bring up healthcare as a talking point. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll try.
being the squeaky wheel.
All right? Okay.
Thank you. So I'll tag along. With all due respect, Mike, I'm very grateful for what your group is doing. My focus is always with the fire department because I believe we can look at alternative service delivery models, as you know. When you speak to Derek Kilmer, perhaps you could put pressure for the Medicare reimbursement rates, which are huge. They affect us, obviously they affect the hospital, and if we could get the city council to put that on the legislative agenda to push for that, that would be helpful. The question that I have is, when are you going into labor negotiations with the fire department? How much time do we have to bring you some alternatives to speak to them?
I don't know. They are end of the year. And typically how the labor negotiation is the union contacts us and says they want to start the negotiation. So we don't have a date yet.
I'm guessing it'll start in August.
Okay.
And yes, our contract expires at the end of the year.
Okay. So we've got time as citizens to put together some information to provide to you. Talk to Ride to Wellness, get some more information on the private ambulance situation, discuss maybe having a nurse practitioner, working with the fire department, just some different ways of looking at that service delivery model, working with telemedicine so that some of our citizens who don't really need to be transported to the hospital can do that via a Zoom call. I know it takes training and it takes cost for the fire department to do it, but again, it starts out where comes back around to where Carolyn started. We need to keep these guys in town. It's not so much having more of them, it's utilizing them in a better way.
Yeah, again, I think the labor negotiation is going to be a real difficult one. So far, we haven't done a really good job, or we're really not on the same page of the direction. So it's going to be, we will negotiate in good faith. We'll try to do the best, but in the past of my conversation, there's not a lot of conversation as far as they are very, very focused on what is it called when we take jobs away?
Skimming.
Right. So, but again, I think there as I talked when we were talking with CMAR, there has to be some hybrid things out there or unique solutions to rural medicine that we can partner that is more than just the city, but it's also maybe CMAR, the nation, etc. We just have to find that, and someone like Derek Kilmer probably can help us in that direction. But I'm open to any and all ideas. Getting them done are sometimes more difficult to do, but I'm willing to slug away and see what happens.
About roads, I would like to support both of those proposals in regard to keeping our firefighters here in their district. It's very crucial. We know that we've been in shortfalls. In the past, we used to have a supply of volunteers, which we no longer have. They could have filled in the gaps, but that's not an option anymore. So just having more firefighters hired, that doesn't tell you how many are on staff in any one shift. That's not even in the contract, by the way. So we need to keep those firefighters here in our district. That's what we're paying them for. So we need to work out a way to get a regional system that can help all these communities with transport. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the stormwater system, which includes the fresh waterways. I understand right now they're going to be treating the waterways this season, and we're already utilizing the budget and maxed out as to how much they can treat. So we need to think down the road to provide a better mechanism to have the proper funding to do the proper job, because they're already shortfalling in areas such as pennywort and parrot feather, which are inundating our entire system. And parrot feather actually kills the pennywort. It's very detrimental. It costs a lot of money to treat it, so we need to look forward to make sure that we provide the needed funding so that we don't run into a shortfall.
So just I believe the regional fire district, that is the future of Ocean Shores. It would be probably years, but that is the solution, because you're right that for the city to have their own fire district probably isn't going to work when you look at the volunteers, because you can't find the volunteers, and if you were to include the revenue from Seabrook in there, probably would make financial sense and probably better coverage by doing that. So that's something that probably down the road that we're going to be working on. As far as the funding of the waterways, that's part of our budget. Yeah.
I can actually speak to that just a small bit. That integrated aquatic vegetation management plan that the city is working on now, and just recently passed a contract with a consultant to get that updated, will open up funding for us through the Department of Ecology to address some of those invasive species and hazardous plant vegetation within the waterways. We just closed out a parrot feather, I think, in 2015, and so once that is updated and gets approved by Department of Ecology, we will have access to further funding through the state as well, just for future use.
That's great, because we have been non-compliant in order to get these grants, and we have to get all these studies by state requirement. We were even non-compliant last year. So we need an entire comprehensive plan that treats all things like parks and whatever. We've got to get that finished as well.
And I'm working hard to get us caught up on all those type of things. I mean, so it's a priority for us. The Fresh Waterways Board is very clear of what their expectations of us. We think in the budget that we'll bring forward. I've hopefully got a new public works director that starts August 1st. And one of his first priorities are to get his feet on the ground and start working on our waterways. Yeah.
I believe we're having a discussion on Monday at council about, we have some money in the storm fund that was allocated for an employee that's just been sitting in the fund balance, and I think we're going to have a discussion Monday about using some of that funding for a plan to get it going. So.
Okay. So with that, we'll wrap up because I think he's almost out of tape. With it, I appreciate you guys spending a beautiful day here inside. Most of you, I think I run into you, but if you ever have a question, a concern, whatever, send it my way. We might not always agree, but at least I can tell you where we're going. And again, my staff does a great job, and usually they can answer most of the questions that come our way. But we're really working on trying to make Ocean Shores just a great place to live.
Thank you.